Good morning. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Wow, this is a super exciting day for us all at New Relic, and we're so thrilled to welcome you all to FutureStack15. This is our third conference, and it's definitely going to be our best yet. And we're particularly excited to be hosting it here at this wonderful historic place, the Fairmont, home of my favorite bar in the world. If you didn't have breakfast at the Tonga Room, I mean, where else can you find a bar with a pool in it that the band kind of comes out and it rains inside and you can have a $15 Mai Tai in a ceramic coconut cup? I mean, that's just can't be replicated. My only request is for next year is that I don't get stuck in an elevator for 20 minutes immediately prior to my keynote. But thanks to the good folks at the Fairmont, they rallied, and here I am. You're stuck with me. I want to thank our sponsors because, you know, we recognize that the mission we're on at New Relic is a noble mission, but it takes a partnership with lots of like-minded companies. What we all believe in is kind of expressed in the theme of that great video that just came on, is that we're at an exciting time because the world is changing through software, and that it takes a collection of great companies, as well as a collection of great people, the people in this room, to take software and change the world. And so get to know these companies that are sponsoring our conference, and I'm sure you'll enjoy working with them as we do. So guess what this is? It's a safe harbor slide. This is the most exciting slide of the whole day. There's a reason why we have a safe harbor slide. It's because we went public last year. So that was a big moment for us. And it was a particularly big moment for the lady in the white next to me. That's my mom. The head of the New York Stock Exchange said he never in all of the IPOs witnessed saw a lady in her 70s dancing like this on the stage quite so joyously. I think she's streaming right now. So Mom, thank you for being part of that. But we're now a public company, but it's really just a step along our journey, which we hope and believe will go on for decades to come, because we feel like we have a very important part to play at a very important part in time. And I want to spend a couple minutes on where we are right now in the industry and why we're all at this conference. You know, why are we here at FutureStack? Not necessarily why are we here philosophically, you know, on this planet. That's a different conference. Of which I have very little expertise, but I do have a sense of why we're all here. And I can certainly share why I'm here at New Relic and why I'm here at FutureStack. It's because I believe in software, and I love software. Here I am at my first job. This is in 1993. I'm fresh out of college, and I'm working at this company some of you may have heard of. It's called Apple. And I'm in a joyful spot. I'm surrounded by computers and surrounded by code. I'm like living in my most, there's nowhere else I'd rather be at that time in my life. A couple of little details from this picture. First of all, yes, it is true. At one point I did have hair. I don't know if you can kind of see this in the corner. In the bottom corner, there's a little Ben & Jerry's sticker. You can kind of see that. That's on my beer fridge that I brought over from college. And if you can see, my key ring actually has a little beer bottle opener, so I'm clearly in my early 20s and barely out of college. But what I loved about my job, what I loved about working at Apple, is what I've always loved about software. It was this incredible creative outlet. My degree was in computer science, but I never thought of myself as a scientist. I always thought of myself as a creative person that used technical and scientific approaches to solve really hard creative problems. And that's why I get so much joy in software to this day, because we all get joy in whatever creative outlets we pursue. I just think the creative medium of software is the most powerful creative medium of our time, without question. And here's why. First of all, there are no limits to what you can do in software. I mean, you're not constrained by the physical world. The way you might be if your creative medium is say, if you're an artist and you're working in clay, or if you're an architect and you're constrained by what you can do with steel. But there are very few constraints in what you can do with software, and that's why so many magical things are happening in software today. But then the second factor is where we are in time and how software gets distributed. And to kind of get you thinking about how software reaches people, let's look at how it got distributed back when I had a beer fridge and a bottle opener on my keyring. We put software on disks and we shipped them across the world to people. In fact, that's where we came up with the term shipping software. We still use that term today, shipping software. Well, that's because back in the 90s, it literally went on a ship. And it went to a remote place where somebody might put a disk in a computer and they might install the software and they might use it and they might have a good or a bad experience. All of those mights, all of those what the customer did, is completely invisible to the authors of the software. You have no connection between the builders of the software, even the distributors of the software, and the people who use the software. And of course, how can you expect to really understand your customer and how good your software is if you don't have that connection? Now that changed dramatically, and the world changed dramatically with the advent of the internet. All of a sudden, I can reach the world if I put that software idea on some servers, and those servers are hosted on the public internet. And that's a wonderful thing, because now I can suddenly have global reach with this distribution phenomenon. And that's, I think, at the core of why the internet changed the world, is that we've taken out the intermedium of distribution between software and the consumer. But the problem with that was all the friction. A data center doesn't build itself. There's a ton of friction between building your software and getting it onto the internet. In first-generation internet technologies. And that all changed dramatically with the advent of cloud. Now there's no friction between reaching people in the cloud, and better yet, with mobile, you're not reaching tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of millions of people, you're reaching billions of people. So that's why in 2015, software is the most powerful creative medium of our time, because someone with an idea has very little friction between that idea turning into a piece of software that can reach billions of people and have a global impact. And that's pretty exciting. And that's why I feel like there's so much emphasis and so why all the great companies in the world are thinking about how can we use software to change the world. It's because of the limitless potential of this creative medium. But it's not this unidirectional thing anymore. You know, it's not that one person has this idea or a group of people has this idea and they just push it out in one way. You need a bi-directional communication with your customers. Think about, for the example of Facebook. Facebook was a great idea when Mark Zuckerberg was in his dorm at Harvard. But if it was just that idea as is, Facebook wouldn't be the company it is today. What Facebook got really good at was measuring everything that the customers were doing in that software, taking those measurements in real time to make better decisions on what to build next. So it's this feedback loop between understanding what your customers are doing, obviously are they having a good experience, and then using that data to make the software better on a never-ending basis. That's at the core of what we do at New Relic, is help you with that mindset. If you're not measuring what your customers are doing with your software, you're not connected to your software, you're not connected to your customer, and your software won't succeed. And there are particular moments where you can't resist watching what your customers are doing with your software. In particular, there's the excitement of launch day. How many people have kind of participated in a day where you're launching a new piece of functionality and like, it's a very exciting moment, right? It's when like all of your hard work is now shown to the world. And that's just a very special moment. I've had many of those. And I got to see in real time in Twitter, you know, and kind of empathize with someone going through that very exciting moment through a stream of tweets. So this guy, his name is Mike Hostetler, is with a startup that managed to get itself on Shark Tank. How many people have heard of Shark Tank? Oh, you all have, of course. It's this nationally televised show. What a great opportunity for a company to get exposure on a national stage. So that's what happened with this guy's startup. The startup's called Rent Like a Champion, and the shorthand of what it does is it's kind of like Airbnb, but specifically for big football game days in college towns. So if you've got a huge football team in a small college town, you know, there may be 8 or 10 weekends a year where your town gets flooded with people who need a place to stay. And they help solve that problem on a national scale. Pretty good idea. In fact, good enough to get a bid from the folks at Shark Tank. So while that's going on TV, Mike is staring at what's going to happen on our web property, because this is a web business. And you could just see in real time, he can't help but tweet. More people are coming on. The site's holding up. We're still climbing. 8,000 users, 100% uptime. New Relic is there with me. It's kind of like, imagine that launch day without being able to see the site. You feel like, that you've completely lost. It's like, not being there for the birth of your child, right? You want to be there in those moments when something really important happens. And the fact of the matter is, if you're an agile development shop, if you feel like you must constantly improve your software, then every day is launch day. Every day is a day where you need to be watching what your customers are doing with your software so that you can make the software better. And that's where we come in. Not only for Rent Like a Champion, but for some of the greatest companies in the world of all stages. We've got Nordstrom Rack and News Corp here as examples of websites that New Relic and digital properties and mobile properties that New Relic monitors and watches on real time. So while consumers are looking at stuff like this, our customers are looking at stuff like this to make sure everything's working well. And in particular, they're focused on three very important interconnected things. Three very important interconnected things that heretofore have been disconnected. Success involves application performance. Is the software healthy? Is it working? Are there bugs? Is it fast consistently? It involves a great customer experience. Can you measure that customers are having a good experience with your software? And the third is, what is the business performance of the software? If you're an e-commerce site, how many items are you selling? If you Rent Like a Champion, how many people are looking at and booking, overnight stays? All of these three things are interconnected. And let's talk a bit about how we got here and why we think they're interconnected. In order to do that, I want to take you back in history. Again, back in the 90s, back when the software was going out on disks, back when the earth cooled, people monitored servers. People monitored servers, and by the mid-90s, it became basically standard operating procedure. Don't put any server in production without putting something on the server to watch it. That made a lot of sense. Why wouldn't you have something to watch the health of the server? But like many things in life, after you've been doing something for so long that becomes standard operating procedure, you often forget the reason why you did it in the first place. Why are people watching all these servers anyway? Well, the only reason why you have servers running in production is to run software. The real reason why you watch servers is because it's a proxy for the software. Well, along came this new kind of software called application performance management. I actually created that with a few friends that are at New Relic. A few of them are in the room. We've been doing this since 1998, where we said, look, the whole point is the application. You buy the hardware, you run the hardware to run the software. So that's the real end game, isn't it? Well, actually, it isn't. Why do you care about application performance? Why do you care about application health? Well, at the end of the day, it's all about, is the customer having a good experience? It's not how many errors per minute, it's how many customers are having errors. And what's the impact on the customer experience as to whether or not they're coming back. And tying that all the way through to the health of the application and the server is super important, because what's causing the error may be infrastructure related or maybe application related. So that's the end game, right? It's all about measuring the customer experience. Well, not quite. Because the whole reason why we build this software and we try to deliver a great customer experience is for a business outcome. Again, in the e-commerce example, the whole point for a great customer experience is selling more stuff online. In the case of Rent Like a Champion, it's getting more people to book more rooms so they can collect their fee for their value add. And that goes on for every digital project that you're in. If you're in marketing, you want more impressions on people that gets people into your funnel engaged with your brand. The problem is that most companies didn't measure all of these things until very recently. In fact, many companies still don't measure all of these things. And until today, for those of you who do measure all these things, you're using different tools from different vendors. And that creates silos. So you have folks saying sales are down. I can see that from a report from last week. And there's no connection to the fact that that's related to an application performance problem or a server change or a customer experience issue. We think that has to stop. We think all this data belongs in one platform. And that drives our corporate strategy and our product strategy. And more importantly, the only way to do this is in the cloud. The only way to do this is in the cloud. Why do I say that? Well, because it really is centered around the enormity of the data that must be collected in order to adequately solve this problem. This is an enormous big data problem, an enormous big data problem. And I want to go into some technology to explain why this is a big data problem and how hard a data problem it is to solve. And when I talk to New Relic customers and the builders of great digital software, you have very full plate. You have an awful lot you're trying to do, just trying to build a great customer experience, build a great software, and keep it running. Do you really want to also tackle the enormity of the problem I'm about to describe with an on-premise solution? Let's look at the example of an e-commerce website that might have an oversimplified architecture that looks like this. I've got a mobile app on the client that when somebody presses a button, maybe purchases an item on my shop. So let's say Bob walks up to his mobile phone, picks up his mobile phone and runs a transaction through. And everything goes smoothly and Bob is happy and he's bought his sweater. Things are good. But at the same time, Hillary logs in, tries to buy something, and the database is slow. Hillary's not happy. We don't like it when Hillary isn't happy. Now, in the previous generation technologies before the cloud, the only rational way you could try to measure all this was to sample, or to index, or to throw away, or to aggregate data. You couldn't capture everything all the time. It was just too much data to collect on-premise. Certainly too much data to query in real time on-premise in an arbitrary fashion. So what did previous generation tools do? They aggregated. And you lost sight of your customer. And when Hillary says, I couldn't buy the thing online, you say, well, 0.9 seconds was the average time. And maybe we have a max that says somebody had a 1.3 second time, but we didn't collect all the individual data points to answer that question because it was just too much. Until today. Because it's not just, the easy part might be, well, hey, I can imagine collecting one row into a very big database for every transaction that goes through. But it's not one data point for each of those transactions. If you want to de-aggregate all of this, you need to collect all the data points for everything that happened in there, right? So like that one page load might trigger 10, 50, 100 events. And if you want to know that Hillary couldn't buy that item because of a database problem, following all those data points, you need to collect it all. You need to collect it all. That is an enormous amount of data. Imagine every HTTP request that goes to the front end of your site generating 10, 15 rows that you want to arbitrarily query in real time all the time. That amount of data dwarfs the amount of data that's in your application. It dwarfs the amount of data in your application, and it grows every day, every second. If you have anybody using your software, data should be collected about exactly how they're using it and how all the infrastructure behind it works together. This is not an easy problem to solve, but some folks have tried to solve it in what we would call arcane, expensive, and inadequate ways. You could try to build a big data solution on-premise to collect all that data and then index that data in a way that anticipates what the questions might be ahead of time. Everybody has familiarity with indexing and how that works with databases, right? It's a way to say, look, if I ask a question of the data that shows me who are the slowest response times by username, well, I need to index on response time and username to get that answer quickly. If I don't, then I run what's called a table scan, where I scan all the rows in the database, and things melt and the lights dim, and if it's a production database, you might actually impact production. You might even take it down, right? So you put in indexes, and you get quick answers when you've written the right indexes. You imagine how much time it takes just to build and manage that kind of database? If you decided to do it today, even if you're using great cloud technologies, you're months away from having this really working to the way you want it. And then if you're lucky and you hit the query, you're going to get a fast answer. Until a new question comes along that says, well, I want to break it out by gender, or I want to break it out by age, or I want to break it out by sign-up date. Oh, I didn't put an index for that. It's OK. I've only got a 3 trillion row database I can put an index in. Can I get back to you in 2 weeks? It says, oh, I didn't want gender after all. I wanted something else, right? So that loses flexibility. It's a very inflexible solution. And the only way you can be successful in business is to be able to ask lots of questions, right? Asking questions and getting immediate answers, that feeds the next question. It's that feedback loop, that iterative feedback loop of question and answer of your software that enables you to have insights and solve problems. When you lose flexibility, you lose that ability to do that, you get rigid in your thinking, and you lose control, or you lose your opportunity to differentiate. This ain't cheap. This ain't cheap to build. It's a lot of hardware you got to manage, a lot of instances you need to run if you're using cloud. And it's all in service of measuring the software. It's all taking away from your time and energy on what you should be doing, which is building awesome software that your customers love to use. But there's an even more expensive way to do it. Brute force. What if you built a supercluster that was an enormous, gigantic build that basically said, I'm not going to worry about indexes. I can't presuppose what the questions are, so I'm just going to try to, anytime somebody asks a question, brute force my way through the data as fast as possible. And if you spend enough money, maybe you can scan 1 billion rows in a second. Has to be a lot of money. Has to be a huge cluster. Cluster F maybe, but we'll just say it has to be a huge cluster. Sorry, Mom. You get flexibility at great cost, enormous cost. We think there's a better way. We actually solve this problem for all of you. And we do it with a proprietary database we built from the ground up that nobody else has and nobody else has done, because it's purpose-built for this problem. It's a database called NRDB. It's a multi-tenant cloud analytics database. This is the database that fuels the engine that is New Relic Insights. Okay? And what's special about it, I looked at all the other databases. I think some of you have heard the story. I spent most of 2012 trying to solve the above problems, the whole how do we get closer to the customer. And I ran into walls with the other technologies. Either we needed to index on everything, because we couldn't presuppose what our customers' questions were. Or we needed to build an enormous supercluster for every customer, because all the existing open source database technologies were never designed to be hosted in a multi-tenant environment. And they weren't really designed with SaaS in mind. These are databases that are intended to be run in traditional environments, not as a database as a service. But that's what we've built. And it's unique. And I'm going to go into the multi-tenant nature of it in a second, because that's the real key thing you need to understand, is why this is so hard, or, well, beyond expensive to do if you're to do it on-premise with your own stuff. We've built this supercluster so you don't have to. And right now, it's collecting over 2 million events every second. That's the insert rate into our cloud database, 2 million events per second. And at trade shows like this, people throw out big numbers, and it's really hard to get a sense, well, how do I kind of map that in the universe of how much is 2 million events per second? So here's some context for you to kind of understand. Every day, here are the event insert rates of the top social media companies. So we see Instagram posts 80 million events per day. 500 million tweets are issued every day. And WhatsApp at 700 million images shared every day. And if you were here at last year's FutureStack, you may have noticed we actually put all of the tweets in real time into Insights as one of the many tenants in our multi-tenant cluster, and it was a non-event for us. We were able to do real-time analytics on every tweet in existence in real time. That's the level of processing power we do, because by comparison to this many events per day, New Relic is collecting 18 billion events every day. 18 billion events every day. So if you're not Google, then you should be just fine inside NRDB for all of your web properties. And maybe Google, I don't know. Let's just say if you're not Google. Keep my lawyers happy. All right, that's the write activity. That's the write activity. But this isn't data that's going into cold storage for weekly reports that are indexed. That's the old way of thinking about it. You need to be flexible. You need to be able to query this all in real time. So when we do run a query, it is a lightning fast table scan. And we're scanning 126 trillion events every day. 126 trillion events every day. And to kind of just give you a sense of the power of NRDB, I just want to, let's just go to a demo. I decided I'd do this last minute. So can we just flip over to a demo for fun? So this is a dashboard that shows New Relic Insights reporting on NRDB itself. And I just decided to see how we're doing. This is literally real time, so I was taking risk. Hopefully we don't have a hiccup right now. And we're not having a hiccup because this thing just chugs right along. So when I said 2 million events per second, I was definitely undershooting. It's 2.5 million events per second it's inserting right now. And the average query going through that database is a 20 millisecond query. 99% of our queries are at 221 milliseconds. And they're all table scans. That's mind-blowing. And in aggregate, they're looking at 800 million events per second right now. Earlier this morning, I was seeing that 3 or 4 billion events per second, and the 99 percentile query time doesn't move. So that is kind of what's chugging along for all of our customers right now, enabling you to really understand what's going on in your software and in your business. We don't think there's a database remotely like this, certainly in the cloud. And we think that's a foundational technology that you want to understand how it works, because it's going to impact how you think about watching your software and measuring your software. So if we go back from the demo, we can show how on earth is this possible. How on earth is this possible? So the way it works is we've built this enormous supercluster. Really, really large number of machines that would be too expensive to conceive of to build for any single customer. But for any one of our customers, like Rent Like a Champion, when their data goes into NRDB, it's parceled up into all of the servers in our cluster. And there's duplication of that data, so if one of the servers goes down and things like that. So there's lots of things we do to ensure resiliency and performance. But these are big, beefy servers with lots of RAM, so that when someone from Rent Like a Champion writes a query, that data is already going to be in memory, and you can do a lightning fast table scan that spans the entire database. So if you ask, what are the most popular universities that people are looking at right now at Rent Like a Champion? Because we want to make sure there's enough supply rooms at the towns that people want to go stay at. That's an important real-time question. You don't want to ask that a week later. You want to know that right now, early in the week, right? So you run that query, and NRDB does an awful lot of magic super fast and comes back in 43 milliseconds and says, I've looked at all the page view events, and the most popular university is Notre Dame. And because you get that in real time, your mind is in a place where you can creatively solve the problem and say, you know what? Our whole QA team went to Notre Dame. I have a feeling this is actually not quite the right question. I think I've got bad data because I didn't ask the right question. Because there's probably a bunch of test data that is going on in production that always returns Notre Dame. So can I just put something in the where clause or say not test equals true? And all of a sudden, in the old world, oh geez, you're all of a sudden you're hitting a column that we don't index on, and that could melt the database. No problem for NRDB. We just scan all the events again, and we get the answer right away. There it goes. Too many clicks. All right. So that's super powerful. And again, if it was just for one customer, well, you'd be spending millions or more just on managing this database, right? But it's not just for one customer, because meanwhile, someone at News Corp may be asking questions about what's going on in the Wall Street Journal right now. And so they can ask, how many article readers are there out there? What are the most popular articles? And how many of them are converting into subscribers? The only way this can be cost effectively done is with multi-tenant. Doing it with single tenant is kind of like buying an entire 747 because you fly across the country 3 times a year. It's just catastrophically expensive to do and maintain, and it makes no sense. But when you see all this data coming into our data analytics cloud, it's super important for us to talk about our focus on securing that data for you. We're all in on SaaS, and that means we have to have, and we do have, world-class security. We spend an enormous amount of time and energy making sure that the data that goes into NRDB is secure, only accessible to you, never visible to any other New Relic customer. And really what it comes down to is a team of experts that are fully dedicated to the security function of New Relic. We currently have 7 people on the security team. They're led by a guy by the name of Sean Gordon. Sean's previous job was being accountable for the security of all the tax data on turbotax.com. Again, another cloud solution that had very sensitive data that TurboTax had to be responsible for securing that, and he did a wonderful job with that. And now he leads a dedicated team that spends all their time with our engineers and our operations people making sure we do a world-class job of securing all this data. We're the only software analytics vendor with SOC 2 compliance. We're the only one. Because we treat it so seriously, because we're not saying SaaS is some checkbox while we do have other on-premise offerings. We're all in on SaaS. This is the core of what we do. So we can put all the stickers and labels of compliance, but it really comes down to the people that we have and how we focus them on securing your data. But if you think about it, what we've done is we've described a new way of doing things that we think is essential to making your software succeed. The old way of doing it involved delayed reports. You might ask, you'd be lucky if you got an answer in an hour on some of these reports, these BI things that would churn away. And you have a very structured schema. You have to think in advance, what am I going to store and how am I going to organize that data? And sometimes you would try, in order to try to get things to be a little less slow, you'd lose some data, you'd sample, or you'd aggregate the data. And you try to wrestle with all of this on-premise, and we feel like that is no longer relevant or satisfactory. And particularly the unstructured data. So in the case of New Relic, you can just decide today, I'm going to add an extra attribute to all these events we're collecting. I want to add the item name. And then when someone browses something on the e-commerce store, item name comes into that event, and it's already there in the database. We don't need to change anything, and you can query it just as fast as you can query all the other things. That flexibility is super important. You don't have time to be managing databases for your software analytics. So that's all really powerful stuff, and I think with that framework, you now have an understanding of why what we offer is so powerful for all of you if you're thinking about application health, customer experience, and business outcome. And so let's just distill this down into what this means for all of you. Well, New Relic has offered a large number of products to you. And I've talked a lot about NRDB. That's really the database behind Insights. But we have all these other products that many of you use. In fact, how many people are APM customers? Probably almost all of you, right? That's our flagship product. So what we have decided to do and built is building NRDB into all of our products. And so we are now enabling you to do big data analytics in APM, in browser, in all of the New Relic products. We call it analytics everywhere. Because we believe you can't rely on aggregates if you're going to understand your customer. You can't rely on aggregates if you can't really get a handle on what's going on in production. So to give you an example of what we mean by analytics everywhere and how that makes all of our products so much more powerful and completely differentiated from what else is out in the market, I'm going to show you a couple of demos. So let's start with APM and error analytics. Okay, so the errors feature in New Relic APM is our second or third most popular feature. I know that because I wrote an insights query to tell me that. I know exactly how many people use errors and how they use errors and how it correlates to what people spend on our products and how often they log in. So that's just an aside about why we decided to invest in beefing up our errors functionality, because we use data to know that that's something that you use and value. But our first generation errors technology indexed on a couple things. We indexed on things that we anticipated you might want to ask about. For example, the name of the error or the type of the error, and maybe the web transaction that the error happened on. Those are two good things to index on, but now you don't have to worry about that. You can slice and dice your errors any way you want. So first of all, there's this kind of fancy new UI for looking at errors that shows kind of how the heat map of errors by type. But if I look over here, I can see that I am grouping errors right now by error class, which is pretty similar to how our previous functionality works. But what's up here, and what I want you all to look out for in our products, because you're going to see this in more and more of our pages and products over time, there's this little magic funnel. Think of this as like the big data slicer dicer that makes insights do magical things for you under the covers. Or sorry, NRDB do magical things for you under the covers. So right now I am segmenting by error class. And I can look at how that's doing. And I can see that there's this spike. This green spike's kind of interesting to me just because it's spiky. So I want to kind of investigate this. So this green spike is net open timeout. That seems like a networking error. So when I click on it, what we see up here next to this filter is now I've basically scoped all the data I'm showing to saying error class is this. But with the power of NRDB, I can slice and dice in a variety of other ways. So for example, since this feels like a networking problem, I want to look at something like remote address. So down here, I've got some extra custom attributes in my error events that are just automatically collected into error events. And so if I click on remote address, I see that this actually disproportionately is coming from a single IP. That's interesting to me. I see that 80 of all of these errors are coming from one IP address. So again, I'll click on that and look over here. I see that now this is further scope now. So I've got net open timeouts from this remote address. So now I'm wondering, okay, if it's all coming from one address, does this mean that it's all coming from one user? At this point, I should be sharing with you, this is all error data from our staging environment, which we intentionally beat up and throws off lots of errors. So I don't want you worrying as to whether or not the New Relic you're using has all these error timeouts. That wouldn't make for an interesting demo if I was showing production. But anyway, let's see what users are actually encountering this error. It's all coming from one IP address. So I'd expect this to be all affecting one user, but I'm wrong. Wow, this actually is affecting lots of users, some more than others. But now it's kind of apparent to me that this error is actually coming from, maybe those users are all coming through the same proxy server. So I'll just go into one last way to kind of slice and dice it. I'm going to break it out by server or host. And I see, again, wow, a disproportionate number of errors coming from one server. So it feels like this one server's having network problems talking to something else. So why don't I look at the traces? I've further scoped down to what I need. Underneath the covers, you can't imagine how much churning away that NRDB does to just make all this work. But let's look at the traces themselves, and I can look at a specific one and see that, this is all timing out on login. And after inspecting a few of these, I can say, all right, there's a network problem between this application and the login service, which gives me, and I know exactly which users are impacted by it. This is super powerful stuff. It's stuff that nobody else has been able to do, and we're very excited to announce it for you today. So that's error analytics. But while I'm here, I'm just going to quickly move over to another example of how you might use this, which is, what about the browser? What about page load events and looking at how our users experience? What if we could do that same kind of power? Because it's all coming into the same platform, we can do this for the end customer experience as well. So here's my magic little filter box up here, and I'm looking at our global page view activity, again, for New Relic software, and we can see Page load time varying throughout the world. I can change what I'm looking at. I can, for example, look at the number of sessions, or I can look at network time. Why don't we look at network time? And this might help us make decisions on where we should invest in networking infrastructure and perhaps local data center presence based on what we see on end user experience by network time. Well, again, I see on the left here that I can slice and dice in ways that are arbitrary and it's going to be fast. So why don't I kind of show network time by ASN organization? ASN is just a 3-letter acronym. It means like your internet service provider, essentially. It's your ISP performance. And I can see network performance by ISP. And some companies are big enough that they are their own ISP. But why don't we look at, just for fun, BT public internet service. And so once I've selected that, you can see now I've scoped this now just to BT. And it's unsurprising that all of the traffic now is in the United Kingdom. That's what you would expect, of course. So now we're looking at BT performance. I further scoped it to United Kingdom. And I can go back and I can break this out by operating system. And so here I can see Mac network performance in the United Kingdom, and underneath the covers, we've got all of that just underneath the covers. NRDB is again doing amazing amounts of horsepower work for you so that you can really slice and dice and understand what's going on in your user experience. That's kind of I've shown you 2 proactive use cases of, I want to get ahead of problems. I want to make better decisions so that the future is going to be bright for our customer experience. But if you've been in production firefighting situations, IT ops situations, the reality is sometimes you just got to react quickly. Sometimes you got to react quickly. And the common case can be somebody's complaining about a site problem. So what if that somebody is your CEO? What if I bug my people and say, I'm not having a great customer experience using our own products, and send everyone scrambling in our Portland office? Well, here we go. Here's a view of my experience using this software. Again, we drop no data events, so we can see everything, including everything that Lew did. So unsurprisingly, my activities come from California. I've had some activity from my home in San Mateo area and some activity in San Francisco. And again, I can break it out by ASN. And I can show the page load time. I can show the operating system performance. I can also show whether or not this is specific back-end time for me, or front-end time, or network time. So now you can actually diagnose a customer-specific issue. You can also do that with errors. If a customer calls in and says, I'm having errors, blam, type in their name, type in whatever, we'll look up that customer, put in the customer ID, and all of a sudden you see their errors, you see their performance. This is a game changer. This is only possible when you keep all the data. And it's only possible and usable if all that data is instantly available to you. And we think that's only really possible in New Relic. So that's pretty awesome stuff. So that is New Relic Browser Analytics. You know, if you look at our software analytics cloud, one of the things you may have noticed is that in the past, when we've shown this diagram, it was a horizontal collection of boxes where every box was a product. But if you notice, what we've done is we've kind of moved Insights to the bottom. Insights is still this awesome product you can buy and use, but it's a different kind of product. And so I want to explain our product strategy and how we're going to take this powerful technology and address more and more of your needs and use cases and problems. Across the top, every one of these products across the top are really curated user experiences, curated user interfaces that are specifically designed to solve a specific problem. So in the 2 demos I just showed there, I showed a browser curated user experience where it was showing the map and all that stuff where I can look up networking problems, and it was super easy to use and slice and dice that data for that specific use case of geographical networking performance. And then on errors and APM, similar sort of thing. But there are times when you need granular ad hoc answers that are not in the scope of our curated products. And that's where Insights comes in. So we think of Insights as this horizontal product that we use to address all sorts of interesting business use cases. And the weapon of choice, the way you get at these granular ad hoc queries and insights, is through this scalpel that we call NRQL. Super easy to use query language. Here's an example of a query that, let's say you have an e-commerce site, you want to see how many people are adding items to the cart in the kids and baby department. And facet item means break that out by the item. So I can see my most popular items that people are adding to carts. And Insights will dutifully scan through as many events as have run through your data center, and we'll give you that answer instantly. But that, I love that query language, but our vision for Insights is to be used by everyone. I want every knowledge worker who has an interest and a stake in the health of the application to be able to get at this data too. And so while today you can use that query to get that answer, today you can also use a new and very exciting approach to get the very same answer, and that's the New Relic Visual Data Explorer, which is going to be a game changer for us and for Insights. This is going to make it so easy for you to see exactly what's going on in your business. So who'd like to see a demo of the Visual Data Explorer? Someone was like jumping up and down with their arms up. That level of excitement makes my day. So let's go to the beginning. I'm gonna show an e-commerce site. This is simulated data we've created that is an accurate representation of the type of data that would go through an e-commerce site. So what I mean by that is the Data Explorer can look at any events that you collect into New Relic. By default, we collect page views and transactions, and now we're collecting errors, and other things will go into NRDB. But now you can construct queries and get answers to your questions in real time by just clicking along. So I want to look at the number of page views in the last day. And I can count page view events. Of course, this is all super fast. But I can also say, well, how many usernames in the last day? This is unique users. And again, just by clicking on that, I get my answer. But I don't want to just see how many users are on the site. I actually want to see how many users are doing a specific thing. For example, if we look at transaction name, we see this breaks out by the specific transaction name. And maybe I'll zoom in to make sure this is all kind of clear to you. So this is breaking out by transaction name, and I can say I want to see how many people are clicking on items. So by selecting that, I have now said how many people are clicking on items in my e-commerce store, and that's up here. It's a very familiar feeling to all our other products. And now I'm kind of interested in what are the popular products. So I'm actually going to select a department and say I'm particularly interested in our kids and baby department. It's a profitable part of our business. John just had a baby on Friday from our IR team. So everybody, a round of applause for John and his baby. What was John browsing on here? Well, this isn't real data, so I don't have John's in there. But we can look at what people are looking at. So let's now look at the most popular items in the thing. Oh, cool. The most popular thing on our site is the lobster bib. Who knew that lobster bibs were so popular in our e-commerce shop? This is actually not just interesting. It helps me transform the business. Because now what if I put a lobster bib on the homepage? That increase sales. That can increase sales. And I use data to answer that question in real time. Right? This isn't a report that comes out next week. And it's all in the same database that has all the performance information too. So I'm saying how many users purchase lobster bibs. But if I wanted to, I could also say, I'm actually interested in the back-end duration. How long does it take 95th percentile to do that? So I've got the performance data. What I just did there is I am now 95th percentile of the response time of just those lobster bib items, right? That's super powerful. Nobody's been able to do that prior to today. And if you notice up here, all along we've been just creating a query for you. So if you want, you can edit this query to fine-tune it, to configure it, and before long, you may become an NRQL expert if you want to use that flexibility. It's kind of like some people prefer VI to write their code, other people prefer IDEs. This is like the IDE of NRDB. And it's going to make New Relic Insights available to all of the knowledge workers in your company. So that's super powerful. So that's the Insights Visual Data Explorer. That's shipping today. And when you think about how powerful Insights is, one of the things I love about it is how it can address so many different use cases. You know, if you keep around a week of data, that's great for production troubleshooting, which is kind of the hallmark of New Relic. If something's wrong in production, I need to know what's going on right now. And so I'm going to collect all the data for a week so I can troubleshoot really well for problems that are going on right now. But as you get more advanced with Insights, if you want to understand what's going on in your e-commerce store, if you want to do customer support, you may keep more data for longer periods of time for those use cases. But we're so excited about Insights, which is an incredibly sticky, powerful product that is doing very well. We're seeing wonderful adoption rates. But we feel like we're going to go all in and really owning the market that we're defining here. So what we are announcing today is something that I think you're all going to be very excited. If you are a New Relic paid subscriber, if you have any of our products, we are going to give you, with your subscription, bundled into your subscription, 1 week of New Relic Insights data for production troubleshooting. That's going to be awesome. Imagine that with Visual Data Explorer. Add a few attributes to those events coming through, and you can use it for production troubleshooting, but you can also show the last week's business activity with the same product. Super powerful stuff. We think it's going to be send shockwaves through our competitive space, and really at the end of the day enable you to connect the business outcome with the software health. So before I finish with demos, I want to show you one last demo of what's possible. All this stuff is stuff that is either shipping today, like Visual Data Explorer, or is going to be in beta very soon. But looking a little further out, I challenged the team to build a killer demo of what could we really do to like rethink APM if we and browser if we were to go all in on this database that is so powerful. And I got the team to kind of build me a killer demo that I'm going to show for you right now. So this is a prototype that is actually working with real data. This is our New Relic application performance. And what should be pretty interesting to all of you is it's up to the second real time. You know, the days of waiting to see what happened a minute ago are over, or will be soon. We're showing real-time APM, again, arbitrarily filterable. And because we're collecting all the data points, we can do more than just show this nice stacked area chart that shows how the response time is doing on average. We can do really cool things like heat maps in real time. Super valuable way to kind of get a sense of, are there patterns of distribution of response time? Again, only possible if you're able to do big data in real time the way New Relic can do in our supercluster. And so this is the APM view. Why don't we hop on over to browser? We get a similar view for browser. And again, because we've got this little filter box, all of this can be arbitrarily sliced and diced. So here, why don't we look at our heat map again for how we're doing on our page load times for our customers. Why don't we just say, how's it doing in San Francisco? We get this pretty cool heat map. But now, that doesn't even look like a heat map because every dot on that is just one page view transaction. Since we're collecting all the data, why don't we just look at the real transactions flowing through San Francisco right now? Every dot in here is a real page load showing the second it comes in. So, and I can further break this down. If I say, well, how are my beloved New Relic employees doing using our stuff? So I'll just say, and why don't I take out San Francisco? We've got a lot of employees outside of San Francisco too. So here are the New Relic employees using our software right now. Again, imagine a real time. Someone's on the phone saying, I'm having trouble using your site. And it's like, I see the transactions right now. I can say, oh, who is this unfortunate soul? A10. Ha! A10's our lead designer that's been on the hook for building all these. I wouldn't be surprised if he found a way. Let me pause this. Found a way to simulate a slow page load just because he wanted the airtime. This is the Johnny Ive of New Relic. He's a genius designer who doesn't like that kind of accolade in public. Anyway, here's A10's transaction history. I can see everything A10 did. I've not dropped a single data point. And again, now I can see the specific customer experience, what they're doing in time. You can imagine the power of where this is going now, where I can see every customer interaction. Unlike other great products like Google Analytics, which sample and drop data, this collects it all. Super powerful stuff. So that is where we're headed, and this is something I'm excited to have the product team work hard on productizing for all of you. So that's a sneak peek of where we're headed.